Hi everyone and good morning. Thanks for joining us today and welcome to Business Continuity, Preparing for the Unexpected, the latest live webinar in our Business Insights series. My name is Stuart Houston and I'll be one of your hosts and presenters today. We're recording this webinar and it'll be made available after its conclusion through our website. Recently, we've hosted webinars on 14 ways to protect your business and Threat Horizon 2021, which if you haven't seen them already, please consider watching at your convenience. These are also available through our website. During the webinar, feel free to pose any questions in the chat function, and at the end of the presentation in the Q&A section, we'll answer as many of these as possible. Of course, you can reach out to us after the live stream itself and talk with us directly, if you prefer. So, a little background on myself before I ask my co-hosts and presenters, Gordon, Barry and Fraser, to provide introductions themselves. My role here at IT Hot Desk is as Technical Operations Manager, and it's been my pleasure to enable our customers here for over 7 years. Those who know me know that I love IT, and a key element of this is seeing IT deliver an effective business platform, enabling my customers to focus on achieving and delivering their business goals. IT that enables, that's actually quite a good tagline. Also, on the live stream today, I have Gordon Christie, IT Hot Desk's Managing Director, Barry Greening, the UK Sales Manager at Echo, and Fraser McCarthy, Head of Technical Operations at Echo. Thank you for joining me today. Barry, Fraser, and then Gordon, if I can ask each of you to give our audience a quick introduction now, please.
Yes, hello everyone. It's Barry Greening here from Echo. We have been working with IT Hot Desk providing disaster recovery service for a number of years now, and have a very effective partnership, which I'll talk more about in a few moments. Fraser, do you want to continue?
Yes, good morning everyone. I oversee the technical operations of Echo Reading. I've been with the company for about 8 years now, and at Reading we focus on the disaster recovery service. I'm here to answer any technical questions you might have, so please do reach out either in the session or afterwards if you'd like to know more about the service we provide through IT Hot Desk.
Gordon? I think you're maybe on mute still, sir. Thank you.
There you go. Hi everyone, I'm Gordon Christie, Managing Director at IT Hot Desk. So a very warm welcome to everyone that's attending today. A little bit of background on IT Hot Desk. I started up IT Hot Desk nearly 11 years ago, and today we've got a team of over 15 technical professionals that are delivering various IT services to our customer base that's located all over Scotland. So I'm going to hand you back over to Stuart to get this webinar underway, and I hope you really enjoy it. And as Stuart's already mentioned, make sure you post these questions into the chat function, and we're going to do our best to answer those as effectively as possible for you near the end. Thanks all.
Thank you, gentlemen. We'll hear later from Barry in the guest spot. And Gordon and Fraser will be on hand, as Gordon mentions, during the presentation itself to masterfully field any potential complex questions which may arise. No pressure. And of course, I'd like to thank you, viewers, for taking the time out of your schedule to join us as we present this session on business continuity. And just a quick reminder, please prepare your posts in the chat function. Now, let's launch. Recent webinars have been aimed at mitigating common risks to business and reduction of the likelihood of business disruptions from occurring. Business continuity continues very much in the same vein, making sure that your business recovers to normal, effective, efficient operation following the occurrence of a business impacting event. You'll see from the outline I've prepared that we'll walk through some background terminology first, then unpack business continuity itself, including questions such as, how do I plan for scenarios I haven't thought of? Isn't this really a catch-22 situation? And the whys. Why should I create a continuity plan? Why should I test it? We'll address these topics in the session today, and by the close of the webinar itself, you'll have the answers to these queries. Once we've unpacked the concepts of business continuity, business impact analysis and risk management, Barry will provide an overview on Echo's disaster recovery as a service. which could be a good fit for your business. We'll then have some time for Q&A, where we'll field queries on today's topics before I summarise and close. So let's cover the basics with a few terms. There are a lot of terms bandied about within IT, and the sphere of business continuity, disaster recovery and risk management has its own share. Being able to direct your business continuity plans effectively and make business decisions on key risks facing your business does require a solid foundation of understanding, not just of your business, but also the terms. I've targeted a few today to describe, but don't hesitate to drop a query into the chat function if there's a specific term you'd appreciate clarification for. Disaster. Well, you can't begin to discuss disaster recovery until you know what a disaster is. In IT, it's when your system goes down. You can include your website going offline, the loss of email, your manufacturing software not working, or any other critical applications ceasing to operate. Causes can be numerous: hacking, faulty wiring, flood, fire, corrupted hard drives, software conflicts, or indeed human error. Disaster recovery, often referred to as DR, is the process of restoring your system to full working order. And this can include restoring your data, IT equipment, software applications, and any other technical resources on which your operation depends. A disaster recovery plan, perhaps not too surprisingly referred to as DRP, is a highly detailed plan of action to get your system back online if it goes down. It includes full details of who does what, when, and how, as well as containing all necessary documentation, lists of equipment needed, and where they are. Your disaster recovery plan is an element, ultimately, of your overarching business continuity plan. Business continuity, it's the capability to continue to deliver services and products, and looks at how you keep your business operating in any disruptive situation, whether that's a system failure, industrial action, severe weather, or anything else. We'll be unpacking how you can develop your business continuity plan later. Business continuity ensures the continuity, or business continuity planning, ensures the continuity of critical activities and the management of an incident impacting delivery of these critical activities themselves. It involves a full examination of a business by completing a business impact analysis, which I'll be examining shortly. A disaster recovery site, often also called a secondary site, is a replica of your data center containing backup hardware, applications and data, and can be used if your main data center can't. Disaster recovery sites come in different states of readiness and have different costs to maintain and timeframes until they can be used when required, hence the terms hot, warm and cold. I'm not going to unpack that definition further, but Barry's presentation on disaster recovery as a service will cover bringing it online. Mission critical, one of the most bandied about terms really in IT. It refers to an application without which your business would not function. Think about Heathrow losing air traffic control, perhaps not, or Amazon losing its payment facilities. One of the key items you determine during your business impact analysis is how long your business can realistically accept applications being offline. And from this, you can then set your recovery time objective, or RTO, which is the maximum time you would allow for your disaster recovery to take place. Obviously, the quicker you recover, the sooner you can be back operating at acceptable levels. And this may also impact your recovery point objective, which leads me to recovery point objective. Think about requesting recovery of a file from backup. RPO is about restoring the file, and in particular, its data, its contents, exactly as it was at that specific point in time. For example, if you've got an e-commerce platform, you may need to restore it right up to that moment that your platform went offline in order to maximize tracking and recovery of orders that were taken just before. Now you're all perhaps wishing the matrix was real and you could just upload those definitions. However, don't worry, we've got you covered. Just watch the webinar rerun from our website later if you need a quick recap. business continuity? Well, as you heard a moment ago, business continuity is the capability to continue to deliver services and products. It looks at how to keep your business operating in any disruptive situation. And business continuity planning ensures continuity of critical activities and the management of the incident which has impacted delivery of your critical activities. Here, we're going to look at the timeline of a business continuity event and address some good questions like, is there an industry recognised standard to help me with this? Do they help? And of course, those I'm asked most commonly, the whys. Why should I have a continuity plan and why should I bother testing it? Well, then I'll walk through the approach used to tackle business continuity planning. So, what does a typical timeline of a business continuity event look like? The timeline of a traditional gradual disruption style business continuity event can be characterized as displayed. I'm not going to go through it in too much detail as the graph largely speaks for itself with the flow through 1 through 8, but I'll just quickly walk through that. Walking through the graph from the early indicator, warning at point 1, and potential for a controlled response initially at point 2, you can already visualize the improvements and operational productivity on the green business continuity plan enabled response line versus the red without business continuity planning timeline. By the time you've reached point 3 of the actual incident occurring itself, operational levels with and without BCPs are already reflecting operational capabilities which are requiring elevation to return back to 100% routine productivity. While recovery response and the management of the impact progresses from the point 4 through to point 5 and onwards to complete recovery, the recovery time objective shown there on point 6 goes unsatisfied without continuity planning. And the recovery curve indicated at point 7 in the green timeline there with continuity planning displays a planned optimal recovery rate which returns operations to that pre-impact productivity rate in keeping with the business identified's RTO, recovery time objective, and well before the impact to the business has, in point 8, become unacceptable. This is contrasted against the much poorer productivity rate shown in the matching red timeline, which extends beyond the desired RTO and ultimately leads well beyond point 8, where the impact to the business has now become unacceptable. So, following this classical representation of a productivity recovery and within that continuity plan, let's move into those questions I mentioned. So next up, is there an industry recognised standard to help me with this? Do they help? Why should I have a continuity plan? Why should I test it? And of course, what plans do I need? Well, there is a nicely defined staged approach to business continuity planning that unlocks these questions. So let's review this now. Et voila, my French teacher would be so proud. Well, perhaps not. However, the 5 stages to develop and adopt continuity planning are outlined here, starting with business impact analysis. Well, what is business impact analysis? Understanding the foundation of your business, its key activities, core infrastructure, services, and personnel is the rock bed of continuity planning, and this process is called business impact analysis. In order to make informed decisions when drafting continuity plans, you need to have a thorough understanding of how a failure will impact your business. Business impact analysis is that process for the identification of key products and services, critical activities and resources that support them, products and services, activities and resources. Understanding a business impact analysis or undertaking the business impact analysis helps you prioritize the different applications you need to bring back online and give you an idea of how long you can afford it to be offline. The outcome or output of the business impact analysis process is the identification of that maximum tolerable period of disruption and the recovery time objectives for each critical activity. This then feeds naturally into the process to develop the respective business recovery strategies and then continuity plans for each identified threat. It'll also help you develop contingency plans for business continuity whilst the disaster recovery is ongoing. So let's go a little deeper into the process of business impact analysis. A fundamental stage in the business continuity process is to consider the impact of those disruptions on business areas. Networking, infrastructure, premises, supplier services, applications, and indeed service architecture within your business are all key to understanding where your business could be impacted. Review of your risk management plan will provide insight into your business's assessment of risks, and will provide a foundation for your consideration of business areas which can be impacted. Consultation with your business operations manager, service delivery manager, applications architect, contract managers will also be beneficial in determining threats within your business. It's also critical to this process that business stakeholders are accountable and approve the identified business priorities on threat areas. This can be achieved by consulting with appropriate business stakeholders and referencing business continuity plans. Considerations when identifying priorities, business priorities and threats can include identification with stakeholder obligations, statutory requirements, specific activities and assets and resources, including those outside your business that deliver those activities and services. An impact assessment of those consequences over time of the failure of those. Identification and evaluation of the perceived threats to the continuation of business critical functions that could disrupt the organization's key products, services, critical activities, assets and resources that support them. And as some tasks are more critical at certain times of the month or year, the business should also identify where there may be fluctuations. Once business priorities and threats are identified, these are then categorized to provide a weight of their impact on your business. And weights are typically categorized as intermediate, work that can be resumed within 24 hours of the incident occurring, urgent, resumed between 24 hours and a week, routine, between a week and a month, and pending, work ultimately that can be put on hold and resumed sometime much later. Using the information gathered, the business should then identify the resources in each situation: people, premises, technology, key suppliers, partners, supplies or materials. Finally, to ensure that the analysis is a true reflection of business requirements, an appropriate business stakeholder I mentioned must sign off on the analysis. This ensures a thorough and accountable analysis of the priorities, impacts and recovery objectives to the identified threats to the business, which allows us to move into phase 2, developing a continuity strategy. The business continuity strategy provides that plan of action to satisfy business continuity requirements that emerged from the business impact analysis, phase 1. It defines the project approach to meet the business continuity objectives, obligations, and describes how effective implementation will be delivered, tested, and operationalized. The business continuity strategy also includes the process to hand over the responsibility of maintenance of the business continuity planning to operations. Testing continuity plans and reviewing the plans themselves is going to be covered in a moment or two. Next, developing your continuity plans. Consideration of who needs to be involved in the preparation of your continuity planning, as well as execution or testing, can include multiple parties. Business continuity stakeholders, business directors, communications managers, service delivery managers, press officers, office managers, contract managers, operations managers, business managers, senior managers, line managers, staff themselves. An accountable plan owner and invocation arrangements should be clearly documented in the continuity plan, together with the roles and responsibilities of the officers and teams having authority during and following the incident. A robust communication strategy is essential when developing your plans. An identification of all interdependencies between your continuity plans is also necessary to ensure that all threats are covered and that duplication and conflicts are avoided. Business priorities, recovery timeframes gathered earlier during the business impact analysis must also be clear. This can all sound a little overwhelming, but there is help at hand in the hand of practiced professionals and also in assurance through industry standards. So, standards, international, industry recognised standards, these provide assurances that we can expect a positive outcome when they're followed. And in the world of risk and continuity planning, ISO, once again, is the industry benchmark. ISO is the home of the International Organisation for Standardizations, and they develop and publish international standards. So you'll not be too surprised to hear that they have standards for both continuity planning and adoption guidelines for continuity planning itself. I'm not walking through the full process of the ISO standards involved, as that's quite lengthy, but I'm giving an overview of the stages today in the life cycles for implementing continuity planning at the moment. But quickly, let's just name those ISO standards. So ISO 22301, the international standard for implementation and maintaining effective business continuity planning, and ISO 22313, 2020 edition. This provides guidance and recommendations for applying the above ISO standard. And that, as to the whys and the what questions, well, why should I have continuity plans? As I mentioned, this is the big #1 question I'm asked, as well as its twin, why should I test it? So let's answer those now. The benefits of impacting effective business continuity plans are business reputation management. No one wants their brand dragged through the mud, spoken of or reported negatively, as it pushes directly against the sales and marketing engine, which is geared specifically to funneling potential customers towards you as their provider and generating more business from existing clients. Improving organisational resilience. Creation of continuity plans improves the speed at which your company will respond and recover to unplanned events. But at its core, it ensures that business critical activities are identified and plans created to ensure business acknowledged threats to your bottom line are made more resilient and recover within timeframes required by business. And continuing to deliver critical activities. Well, when the unplanned occurs, you want to ensure that critical systems continue to be both available and accessible to those who need them. Simply put, this ensures your critical systems continue to provide timely services to your customers. Now, what continuity plans will I need? Once your business impact analysis is complete, you'll have that clear understanding of the impact to your business on the various threats and the business endorsed urgencies and priorities for the recovery and a business identified recovery time objective for each. That allows you directly to identify the appropriate recovery strategies and plans that will provide your business with identified recovery timeframes. For example, continuity plans that you might need are loss of a named key supplier or partner, loss of a named supplier, named technology, loss of a named premise, or an identified person or role. Which leads me on to why should I test it? Well, how do you keep a plan efficient and relevant? A continuity plan needs to be exercised to ensure that it is effective, and benefits of performing continuity exercises include building confidence by providing practical training and awareness, clarification of roles and responsibilities, confirmation of lines of communication, allowing specific details and actions to be checked, supplying valuable experience on responding to the incident, enabling validation of the plans themselves, ensuring effective business recovery, and potential compliance and assurance and insurance requirements. Handing on to business operations of established plans allows for the ongoing scheduling of scenario exercises and review of lessons learned and the continuing optimization and improvement of those plans, ensuring that they remain efficient and supportive of business identified requirements. I'll quickly also mention that when it comes to performing a continuity exercise, there are a number of types of testing strategy that can be helpful, and each should be considered on their merits based on the actual scenario that you're testing. I'm not going to elaborate further on those strategies, as that's a whole workshop in itself. But if you want to dive deeper, typical scenario types would be desk check exercises, communications exercises, and partial walkthroughs. One of the objectives of testing scenarios is that you're able to confirm the continuing validity of that plan and optimise it as is required following completion of the exercise. Lessons learned should always be identified and recorded as part of that exercise, and the benefits being corrective action can be taken when appropriate, and then scheduled checks can be performed to ensure that action has been taken, and obviously to assist in the identification of any impact on linked or dependent plans, and to identify any areas of the business continuity plan that might need revision. As to the who needs to be involved in the testing of your continuity plans, this does depend on the plan under review, of course, but there are some common actors in all continuity planning exercises, although the person may not be the same in each situation. How would you test the scenario? Well, I'm not going into that, the full testing scenario in detail, but you'll not be surprised to hear that the framework for testing includes a facilitator who will coordinate the exercise and a scribe who will record key issues and actions so that lessons learned from the exercise are identified. The role of facilitator, the role of facilitator is to handle the running and coordination of the exercise, and they're not necessarily the person who wrote the plan. The facilitator sets the scene of the exercise, provides participants with a briefing, stating the aim and the purposes and objectives, and they also state what, if any, additional documentation the findings of the exercise will then feed into. For example, lessons learned, assurance reports. The facilitator typically reveals events in stages throughout the period of the exercise, with the events listed within the scenario calling for action or response from the teams involved, and it's often useful for the facilitator to devise a range of prompts in advance to promote discussion on various aspects of the scenario and the potential impact. The role of the scribe or the minute taker, who's not involved directly in the exercise, is to record key issues and action points that emerge during the exercise. They're then used to feed into the lessons learned and subsequent action plans. So, to summarise this staged approach. Having walked through each of these stages, here's a quick graphical overview of the elements involved to implement and adopt business continuity planning within your environment. Now, before I hand over to Barry Greening, UK Sales Manager at Echo, who's going to give us an overview on disaster recovery as a service, I'm going to firstly walk through the process known as risk management. Although risk management's not the key focus of today's webinar, I wanted to include a brief overview, as it does feed into the business impact analysis activity itself. And risk management at its core is that act of identifying, evaluating, planning for, and then ultimately responding to the risks to your business. And common approaches to help with identifying weaknesses could be vulnerability scanners, cyber essentials certification, penetration testing, but that's not a complete list itself. Mindful that this can be a whole topic, let's walk through an overview of the actual steps in risk management process. The 5 steps being identification, assessment, mitigation, monitoring, and reporting. By following these steps, you'll be able to establish a risk management plan for your business. To start this process, list out all events that would have a negative impact on your business, expecting to add risks to your list over days and even a couple of weeks. And know that you won't think of all the risks at once. Be sure to ask leaders in other departments also to assist in identifying risks, as you want your plan to be as comprehensive as possible. Also, keep in mind that the entire process is an ongoing one, where you'll continue to add further risks as you identify them later over time. Here are a few questions to ask yourself to help identify risks. Are there any new or recently updated legal or compliance laws that you need to consider? Does your risk have any impact on other parts of your business? And what events have caught you off guard in the past? But do set yourself a time frame for initial identification of risks, otherwise you'll get stuck in analysis paralysis and never move on to the next stage. Now that you have that list of potential or existing threats and risks, it's time to assess the likelihood of that event happening and the level of impact. During this risk analysis, doing this risk analysis helps decide the priority level for each risk, so you don't over or under allocate resources for mitigating in the next step. Your assessment can be performed using a matrix like the one displayed, and for each identified risk, determine both the likelihood of it happening and the level of negative impact it would have on your business, writing the risk in that corresponding box. When conducting the exercise, it's often helpful to collaborate with leaders in other departments. Your first matrix should be a working document using a format that makes it easy to move risks around, as the risk may need to move about as you learn more about its impact or likelihood based on feedback. A virtual whiteboard or a shared document, it would work well. Risk mitigation is where you create the plan of the best way to reduce the likelihood or impact of each risk. You may not be able to come up with a mitigation plan for each and every risk right away, but it's important to try to identify what changes in your current processes can be adjusted to reduce that risk. Start with the risks you placed in the red boxes and create a mitigation plan document where you name an owner for each risk and describe the steps to be taken to reduce the risk from happening. Here are a couple of questions to consider as you craft your mitigation plan. How can we implement mitigation measures in your business's systems and processes? Does the plan clearly state what action needs to be taken? And does this action plan have an appropriate level of response for the risk? As this step can be complex, I've posed a couple of questions on the slide to help demonstrate the mitigative actions for some examples. Design your risk mitigation plan to be a natural part of business where possible. And to do this, consider collaborating with other leaders within your business to coordinate mitigative activities seamlessly into daily operations and ongoing strategic planning meetings. It's easy to over-prioritize mitigative action to the detriment of current business operation. Remember, you're not going to be able to implement every plan right away, and to try and to balance implementing mitigative actions with ensuring that the burden of risk management doesn't impact ongoing operations. You don't want to overhaul an entire business process, for example, just to mitigate a risk that you've placed into the green zone, because that would just be crazy. Now that you've identified and assessed and made a mitigation plan, you need to monitor for both the effectiveness of your plan and the occurrence of risk events themselves. Monitoring the status of risks, monitoring the effectiveness of mitigation plans implemented, and consulting with key stakeholders are all part of the risk monitoring step. Risk monitoring should happen throughout the risk management process. Here's a couple of questions to ask yourself as you monitor risks. How can I empower my team to identify and escalate risk incidents? Are risks previously assessed as high now low, or vice versa? And don't adopt a wait and see approach, as when it comes to risk monitoring, you may not know exactly when a risk event has occurred. Events such as cyber attacks and regulatory changes can come to light months later. So do make sure that your risk management plan includes continuous monitoring, so you aren't caught off guard with a failed audit when continuous monitoring could have helped you take action earlier. And lastly, in the 5-stage risk management process is risk reporting. You need to document, analyse and share the progress of your risk management plan. Reporting on risk serves 2 key purposes. It helps you to analyse and evaluate your risk management plan, and it helps keep stakeholders engaged in mitigating risks by sharing the progress made. And when you start out, reporting can be done manually by entering the status of risks into your mitigation plan on a regular basis, then emailing the report or at least the highlights to the other department leads. If risk reporting is an important facet of managing your risks within your business, then risk reporting software could be a consideration. So we've been through some foundation terminology. We've examined the adoption process involved in business continuity and unpacked business impact analysis. And we've run through an overview of the risk management process. So Now, it's time for our guest speaker, Barry Greening, to take the helm and walk us through disaster recovery as a service. Following Barry's presentation, we'll have some Q&A time. Over to you, Barry.
Thank you, Stuart. Morning, everybody. Just to give you an overview of what we do. Do you want to click, Natalie? In essence, what we provide organisations is a last line of defence. Traditionally, that's been against things like fire or flood, or on occasions with a disgruntled employee with a hammer. But much more common these days, and increasingly so, is the last line of protection against cybercrime, and I'm sure that won't be a surprise to hear for anybody. Just to give you an overview of Echo and what we do. So effectively, we're a backup and DR specialist, and we've been around for about 20 years providing these services. And essentially, it also means we provide infrastructure as a service, because when someone invokes disaster recovery, we're effectively managing their infrastructure in our environment. So we've got 160 employees, so 75% of those are engineers. So we've got a good breadth of technical knowledge and experience, and we've got specialist DR hubs in the UK and Ireland, and data centres in various parts of the globe. We've actually protect, when I say protect, about 5 petabytes of data. That includes backup as well as disaster recovery. And we do that across 18 different countries. So we've got a wide ability to protect various countries wherever your offices are. So just to give you an idea, 5 petabytes is about 1 million. It's over 1 million full CDs. So it's an incredible amount of data that we're protecting. And we're protecting about 1,000 customers, and they range from someone who's just got a single server with maybe a few gig on it, but it's an essential server, right up to organisations where we're protecting 100 plus or hundreds of terabytes and quite complex environments. So we can protect a vast range of different environments. So and as part of that service, we actually undertake 250,000 restores a year. So one of the important things about having a disaster recovery plan is to ensure that it will work. And I've spoken to many IT managers over the years. They've got a disaster recovery service. It's an in-house service. And when questioned about it, they're quite often, because they don't get to test it very often, they quite often would admit if they need to invoke disaster recovery, they couldn't guarantee it will work, and in some instances they quite openly admit it wouldn't work. So to overcome those kind of issues, we spin up we spin up servers every night to ensure that if the need to invoke arose, we can guarantee that we can raise those servers and you can become operational. And in the last 12 months, we've helped about 50 businesses recover in various different scenarios. Sometimes that's been a complete full IT recovery, and sometimes it's just been a partial recovery where they've had hardware failures and we've just had to recover their servers in just a small number of their servers rather than the whole environment. But there's a whole vast range of different scenarios where we'll support businesses when they've had a crisis or a disaster. And as you'd expect, we've got the security accreditations that you'd expect, like 27001 and Cyber Essentials and things like that. Just to, if you just want to click, Natalie, there we go. And again, so just to give you an overview of an explanation of how the service operates. So we can protect physical machines, virtual machines,
I think that Barry may have just disconnected.
Yeah,
the session.
Am I back?
There we go. You're back, Barry. I'll just let you pick up.
Yeah, sorry. broadband connections issues, never mind typical. So yes, the first thing we need to do is organize actually what you need to protect. So essentially what you'll do is identify what your critical servers are, which ones you can't do without, and those are the ones you would put into a DR solution. So you would normally avoid putting things like an archive or legacy systems, things that you don't need, that aren't essential to your daily operations. So those things you wouldn't normally put into a disaster recovery solution. You would just use backup for those particular environments. So the first thing we do is identify what actual applications are critical to you and what applications you need to protect. Once we've done that, we will replicate those solutions or those servers to our environment. Now, Stuart touched on this earlier on. The decision is how much or how often you need to replicate your environment. So if you've got a high transactional environment, it's something you may want to copy every 5 minutes, or you know, is continuous replication. More often than not, people are satisfied with just taking a snapshot of their data once a day. But it does very much depend on, in a crisis, how much data you can afford to lose is one of the critical questions you ask yourself. So once we've decided that, we will replicate your environment into our cloud. Do you want to click, Natalie? And we'll then have a working live copy of your selected environment in our cloud. So once we've done that, we will undertake an awful lot of configuration. So we'll convert any physical machines that you've got to virtual machines. We'll amend some IP addressing. We'll undertake a lot of configuration, basically to make sure that we've got a working copy of your environment in our cloud. So that's the first step. The next step I mentioned, and it's the whole point of disaster recovery, is if you've got a service, you need to ensure that it works. So what we do every night is we will reboot your servers in our environment, in a sandboxed environment, so it doesn't actually interfere with your production environment. But it means that we can test those servers to make sure that we've got a good copy from your environment, that we can access the data, that the servers will connect to each other in the right order, and we can identify any errors should there have been any, and address them should there be anything that needs addressing. And hopefully that is what we do on a day-to-day basis. And ideally, in a perfect world, you wouldn't want us to do a lot more than that. But obviously, the whole point of this solution is that if you need to recover, that ability exists. So what we'll do, just click again, Natalie. Yeah, so if you do need to invoke, the testing means we can guarantee the availability, and that's a contractual guarantee that we make. We guarantee the availability of your environment in a disaster recovery situation. We can recover all your servers or just partial servers. It's quite common for people to have hardware failure or other issues where they just need to recover a small section of their environment, a couple of servers, a couple of hosts, that kind of thing. So we can do that. Actually, people do use the environment for doing test and dev as well. So if they need to test to deploy new software or do some patching, they'll do it on the disaster recovery site, test it works there first before implementing it in their live environment, which is just an added bonus really for the service we provide. Then we can recover the whole network, the whole environment, or we've got a kind of variety of solutions, but and we can combine backup and DR into one service. So if necessary, you just want to recover a file or folder or some data, we can recover that as well. And we can recover that in our cloud, so you'll have a working environment of your applications and servers in our cloud, or actually we can recover on site. There's sort of services we've got where we can actually recover on your site if necessary, but that depends on the nature of your disaster. So if you've had a fire, obviously your site won't be available, so you'll have to recover in our cloud anyway, but those options exist. So the next just to talk you through what actually happens in a disaster recovery situation. So you've got the ability, so we provide a 24/7 service, so you can recover at any point, at any time, at any day of the year. So it's a full 365 service. And all you simply have to do is just to make a phone call. So we make the recovery process as simple as we possibly can. So you just simply make a phone call into our environment. Our engineers will review the situation and review the best course of action. So it may not always be to invoke disaster recovery. It may be that we decide that the best course of action is to just invoke a section of your environment. So it will naturally depend on the problems you're facing, and also if you're suffering from ransomware, is how far we have to go back to recover from when you were infected, and that's another. So that's one of the kind of conversations the engineers will talk you through, and decide at what point we recover from. Once we've decided, that we need to undertake a full disaster recovery or a partial disaster recovery, we've got an agreed and documented plan in place that we review, and the part of the testing process is that when we do find some issues, that we amend that documented plan. But we've got a fully documented plan that is amended and kept up to date, that we will follow and agree with you, that we will follow at the point that we need to invoke disaster recovery. And typically, depending on the nature of the service that you have chosen and your own particular requirements, we will recover your systems and have you up and running within an hour, or 4 hours. As I say, it depends on the nature of the service you've selected and the nature and size of your environment. But those are the kind of two SLAs that we stick to. So once we've got your environment and your servers up and running, the next question is simply to ensure that your staff can actually access those servers and those applications and work as normal. So as part of your own business continuity plan, you will have decided where your staff will work from. So sometimes you will have temporary offices. Typically, I think these days, most people agree that their staff will work from home in the event of a disaster recovery. And sometimes it might be they just go to other offices you may have around the location. But as part of the plan, we will have agreed with you what the process is for allowing your staff to access our disaster recovery environment. Normally, that is just via the internet in a secure connection via the internet. VPN is normally the way we do it, but there are alternatives if necessary. But again, as I say, that's all agreed in advance as part of the onboarding process and the development of your disaster recovery plan. And once you're invoked DR and your staff are accessing it and you're working as normal or as normal as can be, then you just operate in our cloud for as long as you need to, until you get your environment back up and running. So that could be you're operating in a disaster recovery situation for hours, it could be days, it could be weeks. As I say, it depends on the very nature of the environment that you've got or the disaster that you've got, but that's fine. Essentially, you just operate out of in our cloud as normal, and all your staff will be accessing the applications and servers and working as normal, until the time you say, fine, we've built our new environments and we wish then to fail back. And that fail back process means somehow we've got to work out with you how we replicate that environment back to your new environment. Now, it's very rare that people, once they've had a disaster, will have exactly the same environments that they had initially. That quite often people take the opportunity to upgrade their environments or even migrate to the cloud. So under those situations, we'll sit down and look at what your new environment consists of and then work out a plan to get you up and running in your own environment again. The whole process is from beginning to end, from the point you come on board as a customer, is fully managed and monitored. So we're monitoring everything 24/7 for DR, and then obviously looking, as I say, we have a full testing process and looking for errors and anything that may may mean the service wouldn't work in reality, but it's fully managed and monitored throughout. And the other thing, so we test daily, as I've mentioned, but we can also undertake an annual full DR test. This is more or less for your own purposes rather than ours. So it allows you to put your annual DR test, it allows you to put your DR plan through its paces and actually understand if it works, where the faults are, making sure your staff can access it. And that your own internal plans will work, and you'll be fully compliant. And then so we'll report on that, report on any lessons learned, and a certificate that DR plan worked. So that's an overview of the service. Just while I hand back to Stuart, if you just want to click again. Thanks, Natalie. Just while I hand back to Stuart, I'll just leave you with that testimonial from one of our many satisfied customers, which just talked about how simple and how well the service works for them.